and I wanted a website, and I didn't know anything about building websites. And so I basically taught myself how to build a WordPress website over the course of a weekend. People today might be like, that's easy. You can just go on YouTube. This is before YouTube. This is before YouTube was like a big thing. So I randomly found these websites that taught you, that had a video on some random video player that taught you how to build a WordPress website. So I did that over the course of a weekend. I was very proud of myself. I started building more websites, started learning about driving traffic. And eventually that led into me working for a PPC company called Reach Local. I think you're familiar with Reach Local.
Yeah, Reach Local.
I was a sales guy for them, and then they didn't do websites. I was like, I'm going to start a web design company.
All right. Welcome to the $1 Million Agency Podcast. I am really excited for today's episode. I have my good friend, Chris Martinez, who has not only been a coach to me, but a coach to many other people, has a ton of agency experience in working with agencies and help them move forward. So, Mr. Chris, welcome to the show.
I'm good. I'm kind of bummed that I was on your coast and I wasn't able to, in your state, and I wasn't able to connect with you, but maybe sometime soon. Hopefully you're coming out to San Diego.
I'm sorry?
You're coming out to San Diego, so I'm going to see you in a couple months anyways.
That's right. I'm super excited to come out for your event, December 3rd through 7th in San Diego, right?
So it's the 5th through the 7th, but because you're a VIP, you get the special day on December 4th. So you'll be there. I think you're probably going to travel on the 4th. On the 3rd, and then we'll be formally hanging out on the 4th through the 7th. So,
yeah, I can never spend too much time in San Diego, so maybe we even come on like the 2nd or something, It's one of my favorite things.
Come out, man.
Awesome, man. Well, let's start off. Let's talk about who is Chris Martinez. What's been the journey for you to get to where you are?
So I knew you were going to ask this question, and I was thinking about how far back I should go. I usually go to my very first company, which was a soccer magazine, which I don't even know if you know that story yet, but I'm going to go back a little bit further. So my very first job ever, I was a paper boy in 5th grade. You and I are around the same age. So, back in the day, they used to have paper routes. And that was my very first job that I ever had I was a skinny little kid, and I would ride around on my bike, and I would take all you'd get newspapers, and then you'd put them in these bags, and you'd put the bag on the front of your bike. Kind of like the video game, if you remember. Back in the day, I did the Paperboy. And I'd ride around, and I'd throw the newspapers around. I was so bad. I don't know how. I would always forget a house. And then I'd have to go back, and I'd be all embarrassed because they'd call and be like, where's my paper? The weirdest thing, though, about that job, that looking back, it was just like, this would never fly today. If somebody didn't pay their bill for the newspaper for the month, I would have to go and collect the money. A little 10-year-old kid, 11-year-old kid, I would walk up to their door and I would have to get the money for their subscription. And if I didn't get the money, the company would take it out of my paycheck.
That's unbelievable.
Crazy.
12-year-old debt collector.
Exactly.
What?
And, imagine some pedophiles just waiting for a skinny little brown kid to come want to walk up and try and get the money, and then I get kidnapped. Needless to say, I was too scared to do that, so I would just said screw it, and then they would take it out of my paycheck. I didn't last very long as a paper boy. I think maybe 6 to 9 months. I also got into a really bad bike accident, actually. So I was riding my bike home to go to my paper route. So I would go to school, and then I would ride my bike to the central location where we would all get our newspapers. And on the way to that place, this kid came up from behind me, and he was also a paper boy. And he was trying to hit the back of my head. We were both on bikes.
Rival paper boys.
It was a friendly thing. Our bike wheels collided, and then we ended up flipping a bunch of times. And luckily, I escaped without any injuries. He messed up his knee. He had to drop out of school. He cut his head open. I remember just seeing blood everywhere. This is horrible. And of course, there's no adults around, and we weren't wearing helmets.
Top nightmare for the paper company.
Oh, you think they paid anything? Absolutely not. This is the 80s, man. Go on.
Yeah.
Actually, early 90s. So that was my very first job. But, fast forward, my very first company that I started as an adult, I started a soccer magazine in 2007. So my dad died. He had cancer, died in January 2007. Then I decided I was going to start a soccer magazine. Now, you're a soccer guy, so you know this. That was the year that David Beckham got signed to the Galaxy. So I thought, I'm going to capture this, this
press is soaring.
Yes, exactly. Everybody, I was there for, his press conference, and I had a press pass, and I went to all the Galaxy games, all the Chivas USA games.
How old were you at this point?
27 years old. Yeah.
Okay. Front row seat to this huge announcement.
So I had access to all the games, the teams, and everything like that. It was hard to get with Beckham because everybody wanted his attention. But I started this print soccer magazine, and I was an idiot because I didn't know anything about print publishing. And I tried to do it all on my own. And within 18 months, I failed miserably and lost all my money and then some. I'd gotten sued because I owed a bunch of people money for things that I couldn't pay. So needless to say, I learned a lot from that experience. I learned mainly what not to do and how stupid I can be running a business when I don't know anything about it. And I had all this debt, so I had to go back and get a job. Now, prior to my soccer magazine, I started my career in sales. So right out of college, I started doing sales. I actually started doing sales in college because I went to UC Santa Barbara, and I started doing telemarketing there. That was the second biggest industry in Santa Barbara at the time. So I got into sales right out of college. And so after my failed soccer magazine, I had to get a job. So I got a job working in sales. Actually, I started working for a charter bus company doing charter bus sales. So they were opening up a new office, and they were like, this guy seems pretty entrepreneurial. And I was very upfront that I had this soccer magazine, and I was actually still trying to make it work. I took the job, and then actually not too long after that, I realized this soccer magazine is not going anywhere. So I just shut it down, tail between my legs, just embarrassed about everything. And eventually, I got the idea for another business or something like that. And I wanted a website, and I didn't know anything about building websites. And so I basically taught myself how to build a WordPress website over the course of a weekend. Now, people today might be like, that's easy. You can just go on YouTube. This is before YouTube. This is before YouTube was like a big thing. So I randomly found these websites that had a video on some random video player that taught you how to build a WordPress website. So I did that over the course of a weekend. I was very proud of myself. I started building more websites, started learning about driving traffic. I actually hired Russell Brunson. He had a company back then called .com Secrets. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
I hired them to be my coach. So they were teaching me about driving traffic, and a lot of it was super cheap banner traffic and affiliate traffic. And eventually that led into me working for a PPC company called Reach Local. I think you're familiar with Reach Local.
Yeah, Reach Local.
I was a sales guy for them, and then they didn't do websites. I was like, I'm going to start a web design company. And that's how I started. 2012, I launched that company, moonlighting on the side. And fast forward 2013, I switched jobs, and I got laid off from that job. And I was like, this is the sign. I'm going to start my agency and go all in on it, right? And I had a couple partners back then, and I was basically that was my life. And I would work from 6 a.m. to 1 a.m. every single day. Wow. And I had this little team in the Philippines. Actually, I think it got up to 9 people at one point. And, I was broke. I was still paying off debt.
Yeah.
I had no other options. It's like mommy and daddy, I didn't come from super rich family. So I had to figure it out and survive. And that's one thing about me is I've always had a very strong work ethic, and I've always been pretty disciplined.
Where do you think I came from?
Soccer, honestly.
Soccer?
Yeah.
Sports?
Soccer, sports, parents, of course.
Yeah.
I went to school for sociology, so I kind of studied this a little bit. But the influences that you have around you, especially when you're a young kid, definitely impact your development as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And
how could it not?
Right. We also grew up in a time when your achievement was really, really important. We didn't grow up with the participation trophies.
Right.
You got
trophies were for the people that did
earn them, did the best. Yeah. We had the all-star team, and you actually had to make the all-star team for the most part. And so I was really driven by achievement because I think I got attention for that. like I liked the praise. But even as a very, like, as a 5-year-old, I remember being very, very competitive. Like, I really, really wanted to win. So, yeah. So anyways, I started my marketing agency in 2012 and had this little team in the Philippines. 2013, I moved to San Diego. And prior to that, I was living in LA. And so 2015, I was so tired of staying up till freaking 1 o'clock in the morning working with my Philippines team. They're great people. The time zone was killing me. So I'm right next to Mexico. Nobody's going down to Mexico to try and find talent, let alone Tijuana, Mexico. I'm like, I bet you I can build a team down there.
Not that type of talent.
A different type of talent, yeah. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to set up a company in Mexico. So this is part of the issue with back then in 2015 with finding talent in Mexico, design and development, is that it was really hard to find them because nobody knew WordPress at the time. They knew how to develop, but they didn't know WordPress.
Right.
So if you put an ad down there for a WordPress developer in 2015, you would get crickets. Like nobody would reply. The other thing that was really difficult was sending money. So they didn't have PayPal back then. It was very, very difficult to send money. You would usually have to do a wire transfer. This is before we had like Wise, for example. It was really challenging to send money down there. So I decided I had to set up a company down there. It was very, very difficult and fairly expensive. And we started recruiting talent for my own agency, right? And long story short, we ended up growing that agency with a small little team. We had over 220 clients on retainer.
Wow.
And I had discovered this hidden gem of talent. So we figured out how to hire people. We figured out how to pay them. We figured out how to train them. I had an office down there. So I was driving back and forth across the border pretty much every single day. I've crossed the border, the San Diego-Tijuana border, at least 2,000 times.
Wow.
Because there were certain days, especially when we were setting up the office, where I would drive down there with furniture from the U.S. because it'd be way cheaper to buy furniture in the U.S. I'd drive it across the border, I'd deliver it to the office, and then I'd go back across the border, pick up another load, drive back, and I would do this like 3 times a day. When we were setting up
furniture be cheaper just to buy in Mexico?
No, it's not.
Wow.
So this is a huge business actually in Mexico. They'll come here and people in the U.S. just give stuff away. So like on Craigslist, you can go to the free section.
Right.
And people will just give away really nice furniture. So people in Mexico that own secondhand stores will come to the U.S. and get all this stuff, and they'll load up a massive truck. And then they'll drive it down. They'll get stopped, and they'll have to pay taxes on it. But then they'll resell it in Mexico, and it's way more expensive because they're trying to make a profit, obviously.
Of course, right.
But there's fewer options. Right? Mexico doesn't have as many options. They don't have a Craigslist free. So like in the U.S., we know that we can go get something for free, or we can go to IKEA. IKEA is so much cheaper. They don't have IKEA in Mexico, at least in Tijuana. So a lot of the stuff would be more expensive. And keep in mind, like I'm still not making that much money in my little marketing agency way back then.
Right. You have the idea of like at some point where you're like, hey, maybe I could build a Mexican Craigslist.
Well, they had Craigslist. Yeah, that wasn't on my
list. Or
I was a little bit more focused on the marketing agency. Yeah. But yeah, so I started the marketing agency. We grew it in 2015, around 2015, 2016, 2017. We'd grown to 200 and something clients on retainer. And then, as most of us entrepreneurs do, I had another idea. I was a little bit bored and burned out from my agency. And I discovered, this hidden talent pool down in Tijuana, Mexico. And I was like, I wonder if I can help other agencies to get access to this talent. And what kind of inspired that is I heard this interview of Russ Perry from Design Pickle. I think you're familiar with Design Pickle, right? Design Pickle, yeah. Yeah.
Are they based out of the Philippines?
No. So they're based out of Scottsdale. Russ lives in Scottsdale. They first started sourcing talent in the Philippines, though. Design talent in the Philippines. So I heard about Ross's story and everything, and I'm like, I bet you I can do something similar for marketing agencies using my talent in Mexico and basically building out websites, landing pages, doing that type of stuff for agencies. So I started running ads on Facebook. We started getting clients very quickly, and eventually we built that business within, 5 months. We got into 12 grand MRR, which at the time seemed pretty significant. And so I was like, I think this is going to work. So I bought a booth space at the Traffic and Conversion Summit in 2018, the TNC 2018. So I'd gone as a spectator for a number of years to TNC because it's in San Diego. So it's like right there. And so this was the first time I was going to get a booth. So we got a booth and spent about 10 grand, which was a lot of money back then, still a lot of money. And I knew that we had to like really make a splash. Like we had to have some sort of impact. I'd seen the other booths and typically it was kind of boring, right? I've been to other conferences too. So if you've been to any other conferences around the world, there are some where they go all out. Mm-hmm. So what I decided to do with my very limited budget is one, we would have the prize wheel. Like to anybody that does a conference, have a prize wheel. It's like the easiest way to generate leads. I brought in probably 60 pounds of Mexican candy because I knew that people would be excited about some of these Mexican candies because it's new and it's exciting. And we were playing on the theme of talent in Mexico. We brought in shot glasses. We brought in shirts. And then there was two things that I did that really helped to set us apart. The one is the day before the conference, I got a hat and it said "Dude" on the front of it. So like our outsourcing company was called Dude, and I got this Dude hat. And back then, I thought that Dude had to stand for something. So we said Dude stood for digital updates done by experts. And so I got this Dude hat, and instantly when I wore that hat on the trade show floor, people were like literally screaming across the hallway saying, "Dude." I was like, okay, I'm on to something here. So that was one thing that was really good. The other thing that
was there a lot of Big Lebowski people coming over towards you?
It was Dude, Where's My Car and Big Lebowski.
Yeah,
for sure.
Both like two cult followings on both of these kind of.
Right? Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And the other thing that I did is I invented a Mexican wrestler like character that we called the Dude Beast.
The Dude Beast.
I had a Mexican wrestling mask that I had purchased like years before when I was on vacation. And it was black and white. So I changed the black and I made it blue and white because those were our colors. And then I bought a cape off of Amazon, a blue cape. I bought blue wrestling boots, a blue Speedo.
Wow.
White tights.
Yeah. Takes some nerve right here.
Dude, 6,000 people at this conference that year, and I was going to wear this in front of everybody to try and get attention for people to come to the booth. I was actually going to go shirtless, but the gal who was organizing all the sponsors, she had heard from somebody that I was going to go shirtless, and she's like, "You're going to wear a shirt, right?" I was like, "Okay, I wasn't, but I will if you want me to." She's like, "Yeah, you need to wear a shirt." I was like, "Okay," so I got a white kind of like tank top spandex shirt. So I was wearing this outfit, and luckily they put us right off of one of the stages. So everybody would be meeting in the stage, and then I would be in my Mexican wrestler costume, and then all these people would leave the stage, and they'd walk past me, and I'd be there like, "Hey, do you want to spin the wheel? And da-da-da-da, you want to take a picture?" And so all these people kept coming over to our booth. Long story short, we ended up closing about $400,000 of...
holy cow.
Yeah, from that
website,
from that show. From bringing on new clients for Dude, outsourcing clients, right?
Yeah.
So then Dude's growing great. In 2019, the business is like $900,000 in revenue, but not very profitable. And I end up hiring Russ Perry to show me how to run the business because I didn't know how to actually run the numbers. I didn't know how to run the business from the numbers. And that was absolutely revolutionary. Changed everything. And March 2020, of course, we have COVID. We lose 18% of our revenue overnight. If I didn't learn what I knew from Russ, we would have ended right there. But because I learned how to run the business from the numbers, we went back to our pro forma.
Let's talk about that. What is a pro forma?
It's essentially a very fancy spreadsheet that you use to map out all of your numbers, right? You do all of your budgets, all of your financial planning, all of your sales targets, your profit goals. Everything goes inside of that financial planning document. It's a very, very complicated, fancy spreadsheet. And I'm not a spreadsheet guy.
Right. Was Russ the one who shared this first pro forma with you?
He's the one who showed it to me. And he showed me his numbers. So I saw his margins and I was like, holy crap, this is why he's making more money. It's
Right.
not that he's like that much smarter than me, right? Which is normally the case, is like, you know, you're a pretty smart guy. You're not going to meet people that are successful in business that are like over the top smarter than you. They're typically better at a handful of things. Like they have more knowledge about how to run the business. And maybe they're, you know, they are a little bit better of a leader, or maybe they're a little bit more disciplined or something like that.
Right.
But anyway, so we go back to our pro forma in March 2020, retool the business, make sure that all the numbers work. 2020 ended up being our most successful year ever. We broke 7 figures in revenue, made lots and lots of money. And then we carried forward into 2021, 2022. 2022, we started getting into consulting, which is what we do now at Bloom. We had a client or a potential client that came into us and said, I don't want to do any of this outsourcing stuff. I love the way that you guys run the business. Can you teach me how to run the business more effectively? Right? Hiring, training, operations, systems, processes, financials, all that stuff. It's like, I'll pay you $5,000 a month. It's like, okay, that sounds pretty interesting. So we took him on as a client, and the rest was history. And this year, we decided, okay, we're not going to do any more of the outsourcing. Actually, last year, we stopped doing the outsourcing, taking on new clients. This year, we said, okay, we're done with outsourcing. It's not the future of the company. We're way more passionate about the management consulting and helping agencies to scale and grow and make more money, like all the things that we're doing with you. And so we rebranded in July. And I say that dude had to grow up, and we became Bloom. And that's where we are today. 20 minutes later, now you guys have the story.
That's great. There's actually a lot of things I didn't know that you had been through. You know, we've spoken a bunch of times, so it's kind of
not even half the story. Honestly, there's so many trials and tribulations, man.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm sure they'll still continue. So let's go back to Russ. Like, if you could kind of pinpoint, like, hey, he helped you understand the financials. If there was, you know, maybe 3 or 4 takeaways that you could pass on to other agencies that Russ taught you, and things that you wish you would have known years before, what were those?
Yeah, well, the absolute number one thing is the cost of goods. And this is something that I've talked to you about. I talk about it with everybody. At the time, okay, so here's, I paid Russ $14,000 for this 12-week program that he was putting on. And I did not have the money at the time. So it was very, very scary. But I knew that he knew something that I didn't. And I reached out to one of my mentors, my friend Brian, who's older than us, and he's very, very successful. And he's like, dude, if this guy knows how to do what you don't know how to do, spend the money. Like, you'll make it back. So I spent the money. And then like 2 days later, Russ is like, hey, I know you're in San Diego. Like, if you can make it out to Scottsdale in the next couple days, I'm wrapping up a group that was, you know, starting before you. And he's like, you can kind of get a head start. So I drive out to Scottsdale on a whim. And I walk into the room, and he shows me the pro forma, and he showed me what percentage of his revenue he was spending on his fulfillment. And I saw those numbers, and I was like, this is why I'm broke. This is why I'm not making as much money. He's charging $500 a month and spending $125 on fulfillment. I'm charging $1,000 a month, and I'm spending $700 a month on fulfillment. Your cost of goods is supposed to be 30%. Now, to me, and the way that my brain works, I start calculating the numbers in my head, and I'm like, there is no way that I'm going to be able to be successful if I continue doing this the way that I'm doing now. The numbers, the math doesn't math, right? So instantly in that meeting, I started raising prices, not on old customers, but I said, anybody else who comes through the door is paying 25% more. So I raised my rates. When I rolled those prices out to the new clients, nobody even flinched, right? So like, wasn't a big deal. But like, when you see the numbers and you're like, there's absolutely no way that this is going to be successful, then you lose that fear of raising your rates, right? Or that's how I felt, at least.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to work really hard to make no money, or you're going to raise your rates and you're going to work hard to make money. It's just like, it's not really a gamble.
Yeah, I think like, I'm okay when you're starting out if you're charging a little bit less because you don't have like testimonials and you still need to prove the concept and you need to bring in new customers so that you can identify like processes and stuff like that. But eventually you got to make money. Like the purpose of the business is to make money. And it's really sad when I see agency owners that have a great product and they have great team members, and it's like they're making everybody else wealthy, including their clients, except for themselves. And they can't see how to get out of that, right? Like you deserve to make more, especially if you're helping your clients. If you have an amazing product that's making them a lot of money, it needs to be mutually beneficial. Like you deserve to be paid as well. So that's the biggest one, is the cost of goods. That's the number one thing that I think that people are doing incorrectly. And if you fix that, you're going to fix a lot of other problems. People like to say that sales solves all problems. To an extent, yes. Like sales is the gasoline that you put in the car. But if you don't have any oil in the engine, and if you don't have the right map, you ain't going to get to where you need to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I would say the other concept is building out a leadership team. So recognizing that you have different departments in your company, and that eventually there's going to be too many decisions that need to be made, and there's just not enough time for you to do it. Not to mention that you will probably suck at some of those departments. You know, like maybe you're not good at finance, maybe you're not good at HR, maybe you're not good at account management, maybe you're not good at marketing and sales, right? You're usually good at a number of things. You're usually great at like one or two, and you're usually pretty bad at a lot of things. And so as you get bigger, instead of you doing more, the way that you're going to grow the business faster is you actually do less and focus on the things that you're amazing at. Now find people that cover your weaknesses and empower those people to make decisions and help push the company forward. Right. So those are like the two biggest ones that I learned from Ross.
Yeah, there's some great wisdom in there. Certainly some of those mistakes I've seen myself make. We worked really hard for a long time in multiple companies. And at times it feels like, hey, everybody's getting paid but me here. Like,
yeah.
What's going on? I'm working there more hours, and that's incredibly frustrating. That's amazing advice on that. So Chris, you've seen a lot of other agency mistakes along the way. So we've got the having cost of goods sold, really knowing what that is, and having that be a third of what it costs to fulfill on. So a 3x markup, right?
3.5. Let's go 3.5 just to make it stupidly simple, and you'll never lose money.
Right. So that means if it costs you $500 to build something out, then we need to be charging like $1,750 for it.
$1,750. Yes, exactly. $500. Look at you, man.
It's all those years playing poker for a living, man.
Check out Big Brain on Pat.
Yeah. So we've got that one. And we've also talked a little bit about like, maybe we need to try to identify the things that we're not great at. Maybe there's things that we're not great at that we also, which I think this is going to happen a ton of the time, things you're not great at, you typically don't enjoy. So if you have things that are sucking your energy and you're not doing them well, find somebody else and you focus on the things that are good, that you're good at, that you enjoy or great at. Revenue goes up, maybe costs go down. Like the ratio is moving in the right direction if you're spending your time at your highest common denominator. What else do we have? What are some of the other top agency mistakes that you see?
Let me just touch on what you just said, because a lot of agencies don't focus on profit at the beginning, which to an extent I get it, right? But those people that you want to bring in to cover your weaknesses are going to cost money. So that's why it's important to build in profit at the beginning so that you can afford to invest in these other people and you don't have to go in the red to invest in those people. So that's one of the mistakes, is ignoring profit at the get-go. Like you do have to have a clear path to profitability from the beginning. And in my opinion, you should be profitable from day one, because then when you have to invest in a tool or a person or a conference, for example, it's a lot easier to make that decision, right?
Right.
Some other agency mistakes, I'm going to go into... This is a mistake in the sense of not recognizing how important this is. So one of the things that we see, like a trait that we see amongst our most successful marketing agency owners, is that they put a lot of emphasis in emotional intelligence and essentially controlling their own emotions. So we as entrepreneurs have signed up for a very, very difficult path. There are ups and downs. There are times when you're frustrated and you want to quit. There are times when you want to throw your computer through a wall. There might be times when you want to throw an employee or a client through a wall. It's very, very challenging. And what we see amongst our most successful, and I'm talking financially successful agency owners, is that they work really, really hard on controlling their emotions so that when times get tough, they don't let that slow them down. It takes practice to be able to do that. And of course, the more trauma you experience, the easier it's going to be to deal with the next thing. So like for me, for example, like when my dad died, that was the hardest thing I've ever had to go through. After that, a lot of things are not that difficult because I can always look back.
Give you a lot of perspective.
Yeah, you have a lot of perspective. I can look back and I can say, you know what? At least I'm still alive. You know, I'm healthy. The people that I care about are healthy. I can always make more money, right? I can always hire the next person and fix that problem. Or that mistake that person made, that's fixable, right? It's annoying now, but it's not life-threatening, right? But you do have to develop a process to deal with all those difficult times, right? You have to consciously focus on improving your emotional intelligence and managing your emotions. I bring that up because I wasn't always like this. I used to let the hard times get to me too much. So kind of my personal philosophy is like, I never want to be too high and I never want to be too low. Something goes good, I'm happy, but I'm not going to let that like over the top. Maybe I'm boring like this. Sometimes it frustrates my wife. I don't go over the top excited about anything really. And likewise, when things get really difficult, I don't let that drag me down. You know, I try to be the person that's like, okay, that sucked. Let's keep going.
What's the self-talk look like? Let's talk about when something great's happened and you're kind of like bringing yourself down so that you're kind of keeping that even keel. What are you saying to yourself on that top end of the spectrum there to keep yourself in check?
I really don't focus on it that much, honestly. Like maybe this is a character flaw, but I'm like, okay, that was great. Let's win the next one. Okay. You know, because this it's not the end goal. Like I don't know if I'll ever have an end goal. But it's a win, but to me, it's more like a stepping stone into the next big thing. Right. And the next big. And the problem with that, admittedly, is that you can forget to celebrate the moment. Yeah. Right? Like that's something that I struggle with. I don't live in the moment as much as I probably should by some standards. That's, a downside, I would say. But I'm perpetually moving forward. I don't know if I'll ever stop doing that. I'm always going to want to just continue moving forward. Like, let's keep going. Let's go. We got the next thing to do. Like, this is great. Let's keep going. This is great. Let's keep going.
One of the things I've done, because I've struggled with this, is like I have this goal, something I'm trying to hit, work really hard. I get there, and there's this, that wasn't so hard kind of attitude. Uh-huh. Like I'm discounting the success that I've had. And when I write the goals, I've started putting like, hey, how does it feel? With what I'm approaching. And then when you reread that, it's kind of like, hey, this is the mental state of what it felt like. And I know that once I get there, I'm going to look back and think that it wasn't that great of an accomplishment. Yeah. Like if I go back to that mental statement, it's like, no, you didn't know it was going to happen until like you really started to pick up momentum. And as we attack future goals, it can give you some confidence to see this pattern that has developed inside of you.
Yeah, I agree. I've recognized, especially as I'm, basically like, stop dude and then building Bloom. I really enjoy the building part of it. Like this part of the business and like building it from scratch with my agency, with Dude, and now with Bloom. I really like this. Like I love working hard. I enjoy it a lot, And I kind of have one speed when it comes to work. People can tell that I'm pretty intense about the way that I operate. Like I'm let's go. Like I love jumping in and diving into, for lack of a better term, like I love diving into the fight. Like I love it. I love it. So I think that's another reason why I just love, continuing to move forward. I will say on the flip side, one of the things that really helps me when things are really, really hard, where you're thinking about quitting, because that happens to all of us. Don't think that anybody that's out there has never thought about quitting, because that crosses everybody's mind. I have a journal, right? I'm a big journaler. Every morning I do my 5-minute gratitude journal. And I have this saying that I write in my journal every single day. I've written it every single day. I've done my journal every single day for the past 5 years. Same with my meditation. I write in there, I am strong and powerful, and I can solve any problem. Every day for the past 5 years, I've written those two statements. So what I'm trying to do, what I think I've done, is that when something goes difficult, my brain doesn't even hesitate. I can solve any problem. What's that? Oh, yeah, I can solve that. I can solve any problem. It's become a part of my DNA to an extent. Mm-hmm. I'm not a big manifestation kind of writing out those statements kind of guy, but those are the two things that I've been writing for 5 years, and it's been very, very helpful for me.
Yeah. Well, I whether you call it a manifestation or loading your subconscious, mm-hmm. you've got kind of a internal mantra that you've repeated to yourself, more than 2,000 times over the last 5 years on a daily basis, essentially, right? Yep. And there's those times where we need that, where we're lacking a little direction, or we're having a moment of doubt, and it's no, this is what we know to be true. This is our guiding light. This is what I stand on. Mm-hmm. And when you have something like that, it can help pull you through those moments where maybe somebody else might quit.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
The thing I've noticed, it's similar with me, is I'm running these different businesses, and there's been a lot of tough moments in there, and I've already kind of decided the outcome. You may not know all the steps along the way, but if the outcome's already been decided, when you get punched in the mouth, it's well, that's okay, because I've already decided that this is what's going to happen. Yeah. I don't know. I may not know exactly when, but I've already decided this. Sometimes I think people are, that the saying everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, right? Yeah. But if you know that this is going to happen, if you anticipate this, and I think what you said about emotional intelligence is really, really, really important. Spending a decade as a professional poker player, there's a lot of tough moments in there. There's a lot of days where it's wow, I'm a 7-1 favorite for a lot of money, and I lost 6 times in a row. That can happen. That will happen if you play enough. And you also know that this is not permanent, right? Something bad happens. You lose your dad, and in those moments when that realization happens, there's a new normal forming. And it's true that it's kind of never going to be worse than it is at that moment. So the next moment, it's going to be a little bit easier. At some point, you're going to be happy again, even though you don't get to enjoy this with your father. And our goal as entrepreneurs, as people that are striving to be happy, is how do we decrease that time as much as possible? Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with something bad happens and then being okay the next minute, because you have enough emotional control. Those are the people that are going to win, right? I saw this at the poker table a lot, where there's fantastic players and they take what's called a bad beat and something awful. They're expected to win a lot of money, but the one card in the deck that can save the other person comes out, and they spiral out of control. Mm-hmm. And then they make bad decisions and they lose a lot of money. And then going into entrepreneurs, it's you've gone through some training. For me, I think poker was my training, and you've got this. One of the worst things that can happen to us is we lose someone we love. And because it's one of the worst things, almost everything is going to be easier to deal with than that, right?
So now you got me. I got to tell the story that really put things into perspective for me. So 5 years after my dad died, I found this charity, and it was...
you said charity?
A charity. Yeah.
Charity, okay.
So it was kind of like Big Brother, Big Sister, but for kids who've lost a parent to cancer or had somebody in their family that was sick or dying with cancer. So I learned about this charity, and granted, I'd gone through a lot of therapy to help deal with the grief because I was really, really struggling. And so I got to this point, I was a little scared. I was like, all right, I think I have to do this, though. And so I signed up to be a part of this charity, and they pair you up with a young man. If you're a man, they pair you up with a young man who somehow has a connection to cancer. So I get paired up with this kid named Patrick. He's 13 years old. He lives in downtown LA, and his mom had been battling breast cancer for 4 years. And so I get paired up with Patrick. It's June of 2012, and we instantly become friends, like just great friends, right? And I would go hang out with him twice a month. I'd drive out there. We'd go do something fun. He was really into sports and like just a happy kid. And fast forward to 5 months. 5 months later, it is November of 2012, right before Thanksgiving. And his mom says, hey, I need to talk to you. And I knew that it was something bad. So we jump on a phone call, and she says that she's not responding to the chemo anymore, and she doesn't have much time left. So the day after Thanksgiving, I drive back out, and we decide that we're going to tell the kids that their mom is going to die. And you don't ever want to have that conversation with anybody, not let alone a 13-year-old kid and his 10-year-old sister. So, I'm there. I drove back out there to be with him, I don't know, probably 5 more times over the next week and a half. And she died on December 9th, 2012, right? So I think about how difficult life was for me when my dad died, and like all the pain and all the grief that I had. I had my dad for 26 years, 362 days, right? Patrick only had his mom for 13 years. And he faced that so much courage and such a positive attitude, and I know he was hurting. I know he was hurting really bad. And I was there with him, and we're still friends to this day. He was the best man in my wedding. But when I look at the way that he faced that adversity at such a young age, I'm like, what am I crying about? What am I complaining about? I'm so lucky, right? So when you talk about perspective, that's what I think about.
There's these really hard moments in life like this, and the learning that came from seeing Patrick go through something terrible.
Yeah.
And I'd almost wonder if sometimes some of the worst things that happens in life are the most valuable lessons that we learn, that kind of help us become a better version of ourselves, right? Where it's like, you kind of told a story of losing your father and how you took away a lot of positive from it because you had perspective of things, like you were better at handling those. Now, like, hey, maybe if you had it to do over again, you wouldn't want to make that trade. But given that this has happened, you have these moments where you decide what the choice is on how you're going to react to this.
Uh-huh.
Is this going to be something that's going to define me, and I'm going to be forever bitter and be a victim of this? Or like, hey, I'm going to use this and I'm going to become somebody better from this experience. And it sounds like both you and Patrick made that decision. And it's remarkable when you see people, especially when you see a 13-year-old boy do it.
Yeah. I mean, I remember myself when I was 13. I couldn't even imagine like going through something that difficult. And even, the years leading up to prior to his mom dying, when she was sick and battling breast cancer and all the uncertainty and all that stuff, like, man, can't even imagine how hard that is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. I like to think that like if something bad happens to you, like really bad, like there's business stuff that happens and it's bad, but like most likely we're not going to die from that. If you go through a health challenge, like that's all that matters in that moment. If you have somebody that you care about, a child, a significant other, a family member, whatever, who's sick and facing the end, everything stops. Like all those things that you thought that were really important, they're not that important anymore. You just want to have more time with that person. And so, if something bad happens, and I like to think that, or my process behind that is like, you can either let that darkness take over you and drag you down, or you can choose to find the light. And it's really hard to find the light sometimes, but there is some silver lining that you can pull out of it, right? Yeah. Sometimes you have to manufacture that yourself.
Absolutely. There's one of my favorite books, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He talks about the time in between like stimuli and response is choice, right? And that choice is to find the light in a bad situation. It's an option. I saw a presentation this weekend. I've seen this in the past where there's dots on a screen, and some of the dots are filled in, and these dots represent, they use for a lot of different things. So if you have a child, then you could say, hey, this is probably how much time I have left with my child. And, you know, each time a week goes by, you fill this dot in. We're only here for, we know we're here for a limited amount of time. Nobody really knows how long that time is. And I think being intentional about realizing that this time is limited can also help us determine what's really important. Like what are the things that really matter and the things that don't? Because you can get, as an entrepreneur, we put our heads down and we're working and we're solving problems, and we forget outside of our bubble, like there's amazing things going on, right? Mm-hmm. For my wife and I, you know, we travel a lot, and every time I travel, I see new things, and I realize that this stuff is happening 24 hours a day. It's not just what happens inside this office, right? Mm-hmm. There's amazing things that are going on. And for me, this is that, keeping that in the front of my mind is a big motivation of like, this is why it's important for me to build my business in a way that I have the leaders in here that I don't have to be, you know, a slave to the business, because I think that's the trap that a lot of people fall into. We have this dream of freedom when we start the company, and then somewhere along the way, we're like an employee in a company that we own.
Sometimes that we don't even like, that we can't even quit.
Right. Yeah, it's like, would you do this over again? You know. So I want to change gears a little bit, because I know you have so much wisdom, and we only have a few minutes, and I know. Yeah. I now understand the background of like I know you have a lot of knowledge on hiring, and now I understand where it comes from. So I'd love to, for the agency owners that are out there that are trying to build their teams, what are some lessons that you've learned when you're hiring all these people, you're sourcing talent with the dude agency? Yeah. What are some of the mistakes and pitfalls that people make, and what advice would you have for them?
Yeah, so all these mistakes I've made, just so you know, I don't have a background in HR or hiring and development stuff. These are kind of things that I learned along the way as well. My wife is actually the genius behind all of our hiring and training, because she has a background in that and studied that. Just to put it into perspective, though, like at our peak, we had over 102 employees at any given time, and we've hired and trained hundreds and hundreds of people. So I have a lot of experience doing that. I think the number one mistake that people make when they're hiring is they don't hire for technical ability and soft skills. Soft skills meaning like who they are as a person. So sometimes I see agency owners overvalue way too much either soft skills or technical ability, right? And typically as agency owners, when we're hiring, our first people that we're going to hire are our fulfillment staff. Designers, developers, SEOs, ads people, you know, maybe copywriters, those types of folks. And so we say, okay, so we need this done. And so you'll maybe just only hire for the technical piece. But maybe that person's an asshole, right? Or maybe they can't hit a deadline to save their life. Or maybe they don't communicate well, or they disrespect other people on the team, right? Those are very, very dangerous people to bring into the organization, especially when you're beginning. Because the impact of one employee on the rest of the team when you're small and have a team of maybe like 6 to 10 people, you're going to feel that much worse than if it's a bad hire 1 of 100, right? Like when we had 100 employees, I had one bad apple, it was annoying, but it wasn't going to cripple the company. If you have one bad employee and you're 1 of 6, that could potentially put you out of business. So you need to make sure that you have the right technical ability and they're the right cultural fit, that they have the right soft skills, right? That's really, really important.
How do you sort out the people that are on their best behavior and telling you what you want to hear in the interview.
Okay, I'll give you the easiest way to do that in the interview. So if you have core values written down, this is a little bit easier. If you don't, you ask them, tell me a time when. So let's say one of your core values is honesty and integrity at all times. I don't know. I just thought of that one. So in the interview process, I would say, tell me a time when in your last job where your honesty and integrity was compromised and you had to stand up for yourself, stand up for what you believed in. And you see how they answer. If you ask me a question and I don't actually have experience or I don't know the answer and I try and make it up, you'll notice that the story is very vague.
Right.
But if I know the answer, I'm going to give you every little detail, right? So you can, that specific question, if they're making it up on the fly, guess what? That means they don't have honesty and integrity.
Right.
I would just say, you know what? I actually don't have a time in my last job when my honesty and integrity was compromised. But I can tell you about this one time, and then they go into detail about the story, right? So no matter what it is that you're asking in the interview process, you ask, tell me a time when type of questions. Don't ask, what would you do type of questions. This is a big mistake that people make. They ask, what would you do if? Well, now with ChatGPT, you can literally just type in that question and it'll give you the textbook answer.
Right.
But I want to hear real life examples because the best indicator of future performance is past performance.
Right.
I want to see what they've solved or what they've dealt with in their past work experience that's going to help us to solve problems moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when they're retelling these stories, the lack of, in addition to the lack of detail, another thing that would be valuable to look for is the lack of emotion. If this is a challenging time for them and they're telling it like it's somebody else's story versus they're reliving it, like most people wear that on their face, right? They're feeling it again. This was a tough time. The description of it, if you've ever had a friend tell you a story of a tough time, like you feel it. You kind of feel the energy from it, right? And the lack of that will be there when that story it's not a real story, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So we've got the tell me a time when stories. What about the technical side of things? What's your process? We've got.
Yeah, so there's a tool that we use. Yeah, there's a tool that we use called Testome. There's some other tools like that are out there, but we like Testome the best. They're also one of our sponsors at our event. But Testome is a tool that we've been using for years, and you can build out technical tests inside of there for pretty much anything. And so we'll give them the Testome test. It's timed. Everybody gets the same test, right? That's really, really important. Everybody gets the same test. So it's timed. If they pass that, then we'll actually give them another test, which is more aligned with what they would be doing on the job. So if it's a web developer, for example, give them a web development project, not a live one, because that would be weird. Give them a test project that's similar to what they would do on the job. Make sure that they have a deadline, right? Everything that you do, it has to come with a deadline, by the way. You have to tell them it has to be in at this date. If they miss that deadline by 1 second, they ain't getting hired because the best that they will ever do is in the interview process.
Right.
So if they're late on their test project, it's going to be 10 times worse if you end up hiring them.
Right. The red flags only get brighter, right?
Yep. Exactly.
How many candidates are you sourcing for a job to get to this?
Applicants, it's usually between 80 to 100 to hire one.
Right. So, okay. So we're looking at like 1% or less is actually
one to two. Well, I may say 50 to 100. So between 1% and 2% of applicants will actually get hired. And that's okay. Right. We're looking for amazing people, especially when we're starting out. We need the best of the best. We can't afford to have a bad hire.
In the places that you would go to source talent, obviously you were going to Mexico before, but where should people look for this talent?
Typically, it's going to be LinkedIn, ZipRecruiter, and Indeed. Those are typically the top three that we're seeing.
Okay.
Now, granted, if you're hiring overseas in other countries, they usually will have their own website or place where they'll go to find talent, but those are typically the main places that we go.
Any final tips of like, we've got all these 100 applicants. How are you weeding through all these to decide the ones that you're going to send to Testome or the next project?
There is some technology out there that will help you source or sort through resumes. But 80% of the people will not make it past the first 2 rounds. It's just the way that it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you just kind of have to suffer through and fight through those first couple rounds where, they don't have what they need on the resume. Maybe they don't respond to a questionnaire the way that you need them to, and kick them out. Don't waste time. If they screw up or it's not the right fit, end it right there. It's not going to get any better. Right?
Red flags only get brighter.
I will say, make sure that you're evaluating with facts and not feelings, though. Right?
Right.
So, like, can they do the job? That's why we have these tests. And then push the ones through who pass. That's the way that it has to go. Then you'll find the right people.
I think this has been one of my favorite things that I've learned from you that you've really separated for me. Is it's always facts over feelings. It's data-driven decisions.
Yep.
Right? So then what our job becomes in the agency is like, how do we find or create the data that we need? Like, how do we like build the system that allows us to have the data that we need so that we can make informed decisions rather than guesses? Because sometimes it can be shocking.
Yeah. Well, it helps to have a wife that's very, very good at this. But essentially, you treat your hiring like it's a funnel, right? So you have specific statistics that you're trying to get. So that, like just to use a simple metric, like 80% of the people are not going to make it to round 3, right? And you just track that. Our hiring process funnel is like 7 steps, and it might seem like a lot, but really you can go from first contact through the resume to making the hire within 2 weeks. It goes very, very smoothly. If you just trust the process.
I love it. This was super helpful. Really enjoyed our time together here, Chris. As always with you, always learn something, and I'm always entertained by our conversation. So I just want to say thank you for coming on here and sharing with people. I'm sure that there's a ton of value that people are going to pull from this. So any final words before we jump off? And Chris, if people want to reach you, how can they find you?
Yeah, so you can go to our website. It's bloompartners.io. Go to our Instagram. We have a lot of stuff on Instagram, a lot of good videos. I would like to invite everybody to come to our event, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Okay, perfect. So Patrick's going to be there. It's if you go to agencyfreedomlive.com, you can go and grab a ticket. It's a 3-day event. If you buy the VIP, you'll have the bonus mastermind day on December 4th. And we're basically going to show you how to build your entire plan for running your business, how to get the right people in the right seats, your lead generation, your sales, how to implement things like AI so that you can reduce costs, leadership, all your people planning. All of that is going to happen in those 3 days. It's going to be super, super fun. So I'd love to see you out there. Just go to agencyfreedomlive.com and grab a ticket. And hopefully we'll be hanging out with you in San Diego in December.
Yes. Hanging out with me is included in the price of the ticket. Just
it is.
No extra charge. You're looking around the website for that. You're not going to find it. It's part of the ticket. So, all right, Chris, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Patrick. Love it, man. All right, have a great one.